Today, Nikon's heavy-hitting middleweight, the Z8, essentially a mini Z9. Lots to love about it. I'll talk about that. Things that could be improved, I'll talk about that. Accessories I think are awesome for it, as well as why, while I think it's the perfect camera for a ton of people, it's not the right camera for me. Well, hey everyone, it's Hudson. It is truly Z8 day. Well, it's been Z8 week. I've been sort of eating, breathing, and sleeping Z8 for a number of days now. It's an amazing little camera. I just finished 2 videos on setting it up. The first one, click right here or go down in the description, the full video's description, and get the link. Goes through basically every menu setting. It's a long video. It sets up the standard set of banks, bank A, both in the custom settings and the shooting menus, and goes through how to back those up, how to think about working with banks, and builds sort of a knock-around shooting mode while explaining everything in the camera. The second video, again, you can go in the video's full description and get a link, goes to setting banks B, C, and D, which I have set up for landscape, action, and astro work. And you know, I don't expect anyone will go through these setup videos and set the camera up exactly the way I set it up for me, but I hope that watching how I've set it up is illustrative for you. And I go through some hybrid handoff autofocus shooting systems for working with erratic, fast-moving subjects, as well as a way to just flip from your knock-around shooting mode into an action shooting mode with just a single button press using recall shooting functions hold. So some fun stuff in there, and I go through it in detail how to back up all those settings using the save settings to the memory card and avoid nuking those when you format your memory cards. It's a great camera. I've been through it top to bottom. I know it's a great camera because I've been working with it for a year in a funny way. I mean, it is essentially a miniaturized Z9. I'm so used to working with the Z9, I find myself reaching for that function 3 button that isn't there, or flipping it to grab the hand grip that isn't there unless I load this accessory grip onto it. The only real differences to speak of are the addition of a second USB-C slot in the side of it, which I dearly wish the Z9 had, as well as the Z6ii that I shoot a lot of video with. I'm shooting video right now with the Z9, as well as this autofocus mode, area mode for tracking planes specifically from other vehicles, which I think people who love to photograph aircraft at air shows are probably going to love. Other than that, there's one other thing. There's this Hyperlog Gamut HDR shooting mode for stills that I think the vast majority of people should avoid. I go through that in my setup video. Those are the only real differences I noticed from the Z9 to this camera. It's got the same shooting speed, the same autofocus accuracy and tracking, the same insane modes like recall shooting function hold that lets you transform the camera with a button press, the same pre-roll capture where you can be shooting at 120 frames a second and capture a second before you actually hit the shutter button. You can capture an extra 120 frames before you ever shoot. Nutty stuff like that. Amazing video capability and quality. The ability to zoom in, high-res video zoom, where it zooms in on the resolution of the camera from 8K down to 4K while maintaining a consistent 4K image, and it looks like you've got someone magically, smoothly pulling a zoom into your scene or out of your scene. Just nutty, creative stuff in this camera. Why do I wish that my Z6ii or my Z9 had a second USB slot? Well, you know, a while back I do enough video that I got one of these really cool accessory grips for shooting video, the Nikon Remote MCN10. And it lets you hold on to that grip while running a fluid head, say tracking action doing video. This is my Z6ii. And you've got all the controls, you know, the I menu, your display settings, the menu, zooming in, zooming out, AF on, the joystick, your ISO, all, you know, exposure compensation, record, all those buttons, everything is right there so that you're able to just smoothly move without having your hands all over the camera. The problem is it plugs into the camera via USB-C. And so does the power delivery capable charging, whether you're plugging into the wall or a USB-C battery brick like this. So you can't run the camera off external power while using this grip at the same time, and video eats batteries like crazy. So that's the reason I think that they added a second USB-C port. I'm sure that there were a lot of video shooters like myself who are like, ugh, you gave us this cool grip and no place to plug it into. So now people have a place to plug it into. It really is fantastic. I'm tempted to keep it as my primary video shooting camera, which I have, since I got the Z9, been doing almost exclusively with my Z6 II. And it has some limitations. You know, if I'm out in really high contrast scenes, I can't shoot 10-bit internal video that has more dynamic range. It has that limitation of only shooting 30 minutes, actually just under 30 minutes of video per clip, where it times out and you have to start a next clip instead of an unlimited recording time like this camera has. It has a lot of amazing, amazing video shooting capabilities, this Z8. I don't know why I just took this L bracket back off. I was actually going to leave it off the Z6 II to do a little size comparison later in this video. Shows how great I am at multitasking. So everything, I mean, this is a camera that I know a lot of people have been waiting for. I'm filming this right now with the Z9 because I want to do a couple comparisons with the Z6 II. But if you compare the size of this camera to the Z9, without its accessory grip, it's significantly smaller. It's even just a little over a pound lighter. You know, it shaves almost a third of the weight off of the Z9. It shaves almost a third of the price. Well, not really. It shaves $1,500 off the Z9, which is a significant amount of money. But it's the size and the weight. And you know, I'm a photographer who has eaten his words multiple times. Nikon has fed me my words. When the Z7 and 6 originally launched back in late 2018, I talked up a storm about how I would order them, test them, say I don't like them, send them back, and keep shooting with my D850 and my D500. I was bound and determined. I had tried Sony's A7 series. I had tried Panasonic's G series. I was 100% sure I wouldn't like whatever it was that Nikon was doing. And then I got the first Z6 in my hand and immediately ordered a Z7, and my D850 and my D500 sat on a shelf collecting dust. They were small, they were light, had amazing viewfinders that were actually better than real life. I could see in the dark. And within the first firmware update, the tracking and the autofocus was way better than people thought that they were if you just learned to use the system correctly. And I've been a Z guy ever since. The optics are all so much better than the F-glass. That wide, huge, gaping mount, that short flange distance has let the optical engineers do magic with these S lenses. This 20mm 1.8, there's no comparing it with the old F-mount 21.8. The 100 to 400, no comparing it to the old 80 to 400. This 24 to 120, I had the F-mount version of this. It was a nice lens, especially if you stopped it down a little bit. This lens is incredible at all apertures, at all focal lengths. It's like I don't own a 24 to 70 anymore. I got rid of my 70 to 200, and instead I just carry this 24 to 70, my 100 to 400, a 1.4 teleconverter, and my 14 to 24 Miracle Ultra Wide. That lens is amazing. The system is robust. The system is great. I've also tested these cameras in serious conditions, inundated with salt water, all kinds of crazy conditions, drop, bounce, bang. I've had people in workshops just abuse these cameras. The only real casualty ever was a broken rear screen on my Z7 II, and that was my fault. I was climbing some rocks and it swung into a sharp rock. That's where I wish the screens flipped around. We'll talk about the things I wish were different about the Z cameras, including this Z8 and the Z9 in a minute, but they are wonderful. No camera's perfect. There is no perfect camera system out there. You know, I could do a video about all that I've learned shooting the Sony A1 and the Sony A7R5, and I could do a video about all the things I've learned in the Canon R5. In fact, I have done videos like that. There's always pluses and minuses. With Nikon, the ergonomics, the build quality, the retro conformity to use older lenses. I mean, I can still mount my old AIS 105 2.5 portrait lens on this, you know, from the early 80s through the FTZ adapter and shoot away. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty cool. So the Z8 is a camera that a lot of people have been waiting for a very long time. It's capable of incredible tracking and autofocus and action photography, as well as ridiculous video work. And still, you know, it's just a fantastic camera in every respect, just like the Z9 is a fantastic camera in every respect. And I led the teaser into this intro that I'm not keeping it. It's not because it's not a great camera. It's that Nikon has made me eat my words yet again. When the Z9 came out, I said, ugh, I don't want any big camera with dual grips. You know, I like carrying a small camera. I love the size of the Z6 and the Z7. You know, I don't want some big camera. I'd rather, even if it were the size of the D850, like this is pretty close to. I'll get that camera, but when they come up with a smaller one, I'll upgrade. Well, I've been shooting them side by side for a number of days now. And I think everybody, this camera is for everyone who's been holding on to a DSLR, waiting for something that feels more like home to them, that has the upgraded tracking of the Z9 without the big size. People who want a smaller camera with the action tracking capabilities of the Z9 and the speed and the handling of the Z9. People who didn't want to spend quite as much money on the Z9 but wanted all of those features and still have $4,000 in their budget. This is your camera. It's here. Your ride is here. You should jump on and you should enjoy every second of it, like all of us who've been shooting the Z9 for nearly a year now have. The funny thing is that along the way in this year with the Z9, I've kind of fallen in love with that camera, and I like how it feels in my hand. And I find myself with this camera constantly going like that and not having a grip and a button to shoot. And yet it's still kind of big in my hand. Using the function buttons, I feel like I need to grip really tight with my pinky to not lose the camera while I'm using these fingers and shooting. You know, it's a bigger camera. You put it up side by side with the Z6ii or the Z7ii, which are the same form factor, and they're a significantly smaller camera. You know, if this camera is a third smaller and lighter than the Z9, this camera is about a third smaller and lighter than the Z8. It's a real in-between. It's kind of a Goldilocks camera. And I think that if it's your one camera, just like the D850, if it were your one camera, it does it all. It's the perfect camera. The only people that are going to be at all let down by it are the people who love their Z9s. You know, I'm sure David Archer, wildlife shooter extraordinaire and good friend of mine in South Carolina, I haven't talked to him yet about this, but I don't think he even ordered one. He has a Z9. And he's always loved the D5 and the D6 format. So Nikon made me eat my words. I love the big camera. And you know, I bought the grip alongside this camera. You take your little battery door off, carefully kind of pull it in an angle back towards the back bottom corner. You take this cap off the battery handle. This holds 2 batteries. One thing also that I love about this is it uses the same ELEN15 batteries we've been using since the D500 and the D850. And you thread this guy on there. Well, now all of a sudden it's quite a big camera. It's bigger than the Z9. Even with my Z9's L bracket on it, it's bigger than the Z9. And it's not nearly as nice feeling in my hand. The way that it fits my hand isn't as good. I can get my pinky finger in there where I can kind of grip better and use those 2 function buttons better. If I'm shooting with a long lens like the 100 to 400, it feels way better hand holding that with the grip and being able to brace both elbows. I think the grip is valuable for shooting longer glass. I don't think you need it for the shorter lenses, but for longer glass, without the grip, it really does feel kind of awkward after you've had the Z9. And I understand now more why people have grips. You know, if you're shooting this camera without that grip, I'm just going to leave the door. It's tough to come up like that with a long lens. You just feel unsupported. And also, you know, it's a bigger, heavier camera than, say, your Z6 or Z7, which it just feels like you've got the lens with a little thing attached to the back. I shot this Z6ii all over Cuba with the new 82 1.2 lens, and it just felt like I was holding the 82 1.2, and this this was something attached to the back of it. I love the form factor and size of the Z6ii Z9 II. So, for me, the reason I'm not going to wind up keeping the Z8 is that I have the Z9. And if I were to sell the Z9 right now, I'd lose money on the trade. And I, at the same time, lose function button ergonomics, vertical grip integrated, this crazy, crazy long-lasting battery where I've never had to replace one in a day. Even, I don't know what SEPA ratings are talking about. I shot in Costa Rica over 7,000 frames on a single battery with the Z9 and culled through almost all of them at the end of the day in camera using, zoomed into 100% checking for focus to delete ones that weren't in focus. I had to change the battery with about 1,500 photos left to review. It's pretty nuts. And, so for me, I think I'm keeping the Z9, and I'm going to continue shooting video and having a backup camera and a people shooting camera and a lightweight travel camera in the Z6 II in weight of a Z6ii Z9 III. And I would imagine the Z9 III, given Lightroom's denoise capabilities and DxO Pure Raw's denoising capabilities and the raw demosaicing, that I'll probably wind up with that camera, which will be a landscape masterpiece camera and a lighter weight travel camera for me. It's interesting. I think that when it comes to accessories, for those of you who are now in this realm of amazing autofocus tracking and having this new Z camera and adoring it, which I'm sure many of you are right now, I think that there's a couple of accessories I would suggest based on my year of use with the Z9. And one would be right away one of these Hudson eye cups. I'm putting links to all this stuff, over on my website, hudsonhenry.com/ATS links. I've got links to the Z8 and all the accessories that I recommend, along with all the gear that I use constantly and recommend, and custom tripods and backpacks and case filters, all the stuff that I love dearly. This Hudson eye cup is just significantly better than this little ring that comes with the camera. And you can oops, I just pulled it off. Click. You can reverse it just by swinging it around. It kind of requires, it's better to do with two hands instead of one like I'm doing now, but you can make it for the left-eyed shooter just by rotating the eye cup in a circle around it. It goes however you want. And it folds up nice and flat for packing in your bag. I've been shooting with it for about 6 months. There's one little tear in it, but they're only like 35 bucks. I need to order another one. It's still working great. And I like how it shuts the outside world out. The bigger problem with this stock one is that they come apart and they start kind of falling apart and they become frustrating. Just about everybody I know with the Z9 hates this thing. So I would suggest that you drop the, I think it was approximately $35 or $40 last I checked. And I have a link. Those links help me out. I appreciate your using them. But also in this video's description, if you click on the video's title or show more, I'll put all of my favorite accessories for the Z8 in there. The other thing, I think you should strongly consider this motor grip. Oh, it's not a motor grip, it's a battery grip. And here's the reason why. It's also a dual battery charger. It'll extend the life of your camera when you're out shooting, and it helps you, like I just showed, when you're shooting with a bigger lens to get into a vertical orientation and keep your elbows on your sides. It's essential if you're going to shoot this with like the 800 PF or the 400 TC or the 600. Those lenses are big and heavy, and keeping your elbows at your side, they're big and they're heavy, and yet they're hand-holdable in a way that the old big primes weren't. The new S-Glass long primes are hand-holdable with a vertical grip. You don't want to try to do it like this on one hand braced. You want both elbows against your body, feet shoulder width apart, weight over the balls of your feet, and a vertical grip. You want to be able to transition. The other thing about it, though, is it holds two Nikon EN-EL15s. There's two little releases in it. The first release, when you pop it, pulls this whole tray out where you can load two batteries into it. It's quite ingenious. The second release just pops one battery out of it, the one on the outside. And it has a USB-C charging port in it. And so what you can do with this, given that, is put this little cap on it to protect its terminal connection. and plug your USB-C battery brick, the same one I'm recommending in the accessories for the Z9. This is an Anchor battery brick, 20,000 milliamp, and you see it lights up. It charges battery B completely, then it charges battery A completely. And what winds up happening is you just stick these two items in your bag while you're shooting. You can put it in the top part of your bag or some loose section of your bag. And when your battery starts running low in your Z9, or your Z8, pardon me, you pop it out, pop this battery out, swap them, put the other one in, and it's working as a charger. So you got a vertical grip in your bag, you're carrying the camera around small. You want to go to a longer lens, you can mount this thing and have a vertical grip, but it winds up being a really nice 2-battery charger out in the field that works with power delivery. And for some reason, they made it cheaper than the Z6ii Z9 grip that's similar, which after using this, I ordered for the Z6ii because it gives me that second USB-C port for using alongside my cool video grip. So, yeah, I thought it was strange that the Z6ii Z9 one is almost identical but cheaper, but more expensive. I think they're really trying to price the Z8 in a spot where people are excited about it. The Z9, its battery charger does the same thing. It's got this battery, like I said, that lasts almost forever, and then its connection to plug it into the wall also is power delivery capable. And so you can plug this charger right into your battery brick, and it lights up and charges the same way. So that's a really, really cool feature. You can charge, there it is. You can charge it in your bag the same way. So the Z9, you still have that capability. I think the fact that the camera uses these EL-15s that have been around for nearly a decade now is a major, major score for Nikon. I think that's just in keeping with their long tradition of backwards compatibility. So the funny thing for me is that, you know, the Z8, as much as I bellyached about the Z9 being too big, in a way, I'm consistent because what I really want is another camera that's so small. I love the weight and feel of the Z6 and the Z7. And the fact of the matter is, if you're a person who shoots landscapes and people, the autofocus with eye detect for people on these cameras is fantastic. Landscapes, the autofocus is so accurate. The low light autofocus works so great. The only thing I really miss is the astro modes that this camera have. You know, in that video I did on the setting up bank B, C, and D that has the astro mode, I showcased the starlight view and the warm display colors. Those two combined with the low light autofocus capabilities of the Z8 and the Z9 make them an unparalleled camera for night photography. When people in workshops watch me work with the Z9 shooting Milky Way, they're just like, wow. And I know that many of the people from my workshops who've been out with me in the Z9 that have been clinging to these smaller cameras, whether because of price or because of size and weight, are so excited about the Z8, and you should be. This is going to be a dream astro camera for so many people. Again, you know, I'm reluctantly going to shoot this camera back and send it back in because it's just, it's too big to replace my Z6 in my arsenal, and it's too small to replace the Z9. It just feels a little awkward. I'm giving up function buttons and ergonomics and programmable buttons and just some of the things that I've fallen in love with the Z9 in order to have a slightly smaller size. It's significantly smaller, but yeah. I don't love the feel of it in my hand the way I do the Z9. So, you know, and that's a completely different story for other people. My good friend Charlie couldn't wait to get rid of his Z9 and get this camera, and he's happy as a clam about it. So, you know, everybody's different, and that's what makes the world a more interesting place overall. So I celebrate all of that. My opinion is not to be, you know, some sacrosanct thing. Again, full run through the menu. For those of you who haven't worked with the Z9 and want to know how to set this thing up, I got a full guide. Those links are in this video's description. I'll have more accessories as they become available. I'll link Kirk's L bracket. That ought to be coming very soon in this video's description, and I think you can pre-order it. It's a fantastic, fantastic camera. Again, this dual battery grip extends the life of this camera significantly. You notice the smaller batteries in this camera with so much power. This really helps, and the fact that you can plug it into USB-C also really helps. It winds up being worth it, I think, to have this as a battery charger in your bag and to give you more flexibility shooting with long lenses with the camera. So it's up to you. I'd give it a shot. Remember, anytime you order anything from Amazon or B&H, you got 30 days to return it. So again, using those links helps me out. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody for watching, sharing, liking, subscribing to the channel. You guys hit me up in the comments, hit me up via email. I'm always interested in talking gear, talking cameras, talking locations. I'm around home for a little while. I got a family trip to New York coming up, and then the next big trip is Glacier National Park, which I really can't wait for. That's a place that just gets my creative mind moving. There's so much wildlife, so much beauty, so much mountain scenery, high alpine lakes. We got a great crew coming. We're taking El Jefe, the Sprinter van. It's going to be a ton of fun. I can't wait for that workshop. So, all right, everybody. I hope everybody's hanging in there, staying safe, staying creative. For those of you with your new Z8, it's pretty darn epic. I think you're going to enjoy it just as much as all of us who've been shooting the Z9 for the last year. It's an epic, epic thing Nikon did, downsizing it into this smaller, more affordable frame. All right, everybody, enjoy.